Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Kingdom of Siam. Welcome to Bangkok. I'm going to be getting medievally dressed this morning. We are going to a medieval living history activity at which I will be teaching 15th century dance, and therefore I need to get dressed in 15th century fashion. So I'm going to walk you through the getting dressed process step by step, and we're actually going to demonstrate 15th century hair and headdress, which is actually a multi-layer construction. So it's not just as easy as just popping in some braids into my hair and covering it up with a kerchief. We're going to be doing something a bit more involved this morning. So I'm already starting off in the under layers. I am wearing a smock, as it would have been called in 15th century English. It would have been called a chemise in French. Yeah, good morning, welcome. Please let us know how the sound is because we're trying something different with the microphone, but I think I'm going to have to put the microphone on, honestly. I suspect it might be too echoey. Yeah. So I'm wearing a chemise in French, it would be a hemd in German, a camicia in Italian, or a camisa in Spanish, smoka in the 15th century, the Middle English term for it, right? It's made of linen, and it is what is known as geometric construction. So you can see it consists of basically a series of squares and rectangles, right? So the next thing that comes over this is a gown called a kirtle in 15th century English. It would be called a cote simple in French, or a gamora in 15th century Italian. And so, when we say underwear, we mean the layer against the skin, right? And the reason you wear this smocka is to protect your overgarments from the vicissitudes of your skin, right? So that's why people up until the 20th century, everyone in Europe and America, Canada, the United States, lots of people in Mexico too, wore first linen undergarments, and then eventually they transitioned to cotton undergarments because this is the layer that can be laundered to a fairly well. Yep. So next layer comes the kirtle, right? And this is a French or English or Flemish style kirtle. We think possibly they may have also worn these in Portugal because Portugal had really interesting connections with Burgundy and England in the 15th century. This one is made out of linen. It should probably be made out of wool. Wi-Fi. I don't. The internet gods hate us. We are literally in a 5-star hotel with 5-star Wi-Fi, and I don't know how in God's name it is that we lost connection. That is unbelievable. I am cursed when it comes to streaming from foreign countries. Oh my God. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Right, so I've now put on the kirtle. And you'll notice this is a short-sleeved garment. This is still considered underwear. This is still considered underwear, right? This is a layer that actually is an intermediate layer. And we know that this layer is considered underwear because we actually have court cases of women being abducted. And in the court case, it actually says that she was abducted in naught but her kirtle. Or not, she was abducted all naked in naught but her smock and her kirtle, indicating that in the 15th century mindset, the kirtle is a garment that does not actually count as being fully dressed, right? So this garment laces up in the front, and it's spiral laces, which is the best and easiest form of lacing. It's basically like whip stitching your dress shut. Zippers did not exist at this time. Hooks and eyes did exist, but lacing is just much more flexible and much more practical, honestly. And the lace that I'm using to lace it shut is made using a technique called finger loop braiding. Now we call it finger loop braiding. In the 15th century, they just called it lace making because the original meaning of the word lace is not a frilly decorative piece of fabric or trim. The original meaning of lace is something that you use to lace your garments shut. And it comes from the French, the medieval French term lacet. So it's only later on in the 16th century that the technique that is now called finger loop braiding became so ornate that it started made in the 15th century. It started making laces that were very frilly and fancy. And then someone figured out that instead of using your fingers to create the patterns, you could use bobbins. And then you could get even more complicated patterns. And so that's how the term lace, meaning like a shoelace, like a lace for lacing something shut, came to mean a fancy frilly thing. The lace, the practical version to lace something shut, came first. And that's why we call them shoelaces in the modern world, in modern English. It still retains that old medieval meaning. Okay, so technically this style of bakken is actually not really appropriate for 15th century France. It's documentable to 15th century Italy. Technically, this lace should have a point built over it of metal, but I don't have the technology to do that currently. So we're using a 15th century removable Italian style point instead. Okay.
Any comments while you grab that?
Yeah, are there any comments?
This individual said, yeah, the first girl on here that I've seen that actually is teaching people something other than simply discussing nonsense, and I appreciate that.
Ah, well, welcome to my medieval channel. My channel is all about learning and research and understanding history as it was lived by people on a daily basis, not just great man history, but daily person history. So my channel is all about learning and having fun with it and discussing it, recreating it. I don't talk nonsense. Occasionally I'll maybe make a witticism. So welcome to my community. If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider liking and subscribing, guys. Right, so this particular this garment that you see me in now, this kirtle, this one is made of linen. As I was saying, it should be made of...
Say hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It should be made of silk or wool. And I had both of those. I had a beautiful woolen kirtle, and it got put in the washing machine accidentally and reduced to a kirtle for a very small child. I had a silk kirtle, a very nice white damask silk kirtle. It also ended up accidentally put in the washing machine, not by me, and shrunk into something that would be the suitable size for a small child. So I need to remake those so that I can have nice silken kirtles again. But we're in Bangkok and we're going to be outside today, and it's about 90 something degrees and 95% humidity. So honestly, the linen will be far superior to silk. I love silk, but it is not good in hot and humid climates. Okay, so I now have the two bottom layers on, and that's all I'm going to be putting on for today because I'm going to be teaching a dance class in a couple of hours, a 15th century dance class. And if I put on the big overgown that goes over this, it makes it much harder for people to see my feet for teaching the dance class. So I'm going to actually be going out as in my underwear. This is actually by 15th century standards for a noblewoman, more or less underwear, but we still have the hair to go. So let's go ahead. Oh, stockings. I'm actually getting fully dressed today. Let me show you the stockings. So these are 15th century stockings. These are made of linen cut on the bias to add stretch. They have thick linen soles on the bottom because the sole is the first thing to wear out in these. And you see that on the extant stockings that have survived from the Middle Ages as well. All right, so we just slip this on like so. Now, you're right, no elastic. How does it stay on?
Is it comfortable?
They're very comfortable. They're very, very comfortable, and they breathe really well because they're linen, right? So garters were originally not a sexy time item. They were a practical item that men and women wore. Men also to keep up their stockings. So you can see this is made of replica, beautiful metal cast pieces. These are based on originals that have survived from the Middle Ages. This is leather. This is leather. That's my valet. He's going to help with my hair in a moment. These are leather. They were, however, just as often, if not more often, actually made of silk brocaded bands that were woven on a narrow loom. I'm actually hoping to have a pair of those made. So, one stocking. Second stocking. And we know that they were made of linen because some linen stockings have actually survived, and many of them that have survived were cut on the bias. Now, for those who don't know what bias is, fabric is woven with a warp and a weft, right? And so that creates more or less a square pattern, right? You can get some variation there, but more or less a square pattern. If you pull the fabric in the direction of the grain, meaning along the warp or along the weft, it has no stretch. But if you rotate it 90 degrees, then you get diamonds instead of squares, and those will actually stretch along the diamond because the square will collapse in on itself. And that's how you get bias stretch. So that's how bias cut gowns work, right? And medieval people already figured out about using bias stretch, at least when it came to things that went on your legs. They, however, dresses were not cut to be bias cut, but they did sometimes take advantage of the bias to create very clever elastic effects in places like the arm's eye, like your shoulders, so that you can make a garment that's perfectly fitted and yet still give you full range of motion. Okay, so stocking 1, stocking 2. Belt. Belts are not just a fashion accessory in the Middle Ages, they are a practical toolkit, basically. This is a kind of belt called a demescent. Demescent literally means a half belt, right? And it's called that because you'll see it meets in the front, but not all the way, ending in these 2 circles. This is a kind of belt that was stylish for women in France, Flanders, England, and Burgundy, in Germany, actually, in the 15th century. And we have lots of different options for this, but the practical bit is here. And I didn't put on my paternoster. The practical bit is here. This is a purse hanger. This is a purse. Men and women had these, right? The idea, though, is you didn't want to hang your purse from your belt. Yeah, you need an aumônière. You need a change purse. Men and women wore these because they would actually keep change in these for alms, to give to the poor when they were out and about. This is where they kept their change. And so you would put the strings to the purse hanger so that the strings of your purse didn't bear into the belt itself, right? And all of this bling, this is just one of the many options for medieval belts. Medieval people were all about the bling, right? I'm also going to be putting on, I forgot to, but I'll go ahead and put it on. This is a paternoster, right? This is basically my own private little set of prayer beads to, help me say the part of the rosary, basically what we would call the rosary now. You would, basically you'll say your paternoster and then you get to the big bead and that's an Ave Maria, right? So this is a very common accessory in the Middle Ages, from the 13th century at least going forward, and they became increasingly elaborate as a sign of conspicuous consumption. Nothing changes, right? Okay, so my hair can't go out like this. This is what I call execution hair for a woman. This is, if I were just going to go be executed, then my hair might be like this, but I'm not. So we're going to actually be doing it up in a bun, and we're going to show you how to do that using medieval techniques. And then we're going to be putting on a headdress that is actually called a mitre or a turret in 15th century English, but that some of you might know of as a Hennin, and then we'll put on a veil, and then we'll put on a hood over that. So, to the hair. We're going to figure out how to do this so that you can actually see what is happening. And I might actually therefore need the microphone at this point. Okay.
They only bathed 4 times a year.
They did not only bathe 4 times a year in the Middle Ages. That is a bullshit myth. Sorry. Guys, across medieval Europe, there were public bathhouses in all major cities and most small towns.
See the comments.
Right? It's just the way it was. There were public bathhouses. They had hot water, they had running water. The water was changed out every day. It was freshly hot in the morning. By the evening, it might not be so great. For instance, in 13th century Paris, there would be bathhouse attendants would actually go through the streets crying in the morning, "The water is hot, come and get it." So people would get up and go take a bath. Did they bathe in a bathhouse every day? No. Once a week seems to be about the frequency with which people would go to a bathhouse. But in between a full bath, meaning immersing your body in a tub of water, They would wash themselves every day, and all you need for that is a basin of water and some kind of cloth, and everyone had that. They would get up in the morning, they would wash their face, they would wash their hands, they would wash all the important parts, they would brush, they would clean their teeth, in fact, with a kind of toothpaste that was both effective and destructive. They'd comb their hair. Cleanliness was really important. Laundress was a profession. It was highly paid and highly utilized. Households across medieval Europe have left behind records of sending large quantities of undergarments to the laundresses to be cleaned. Right?
Am I doing a single twist on top?
Yeah, just a single twist on top. Right? So no, they did not just bathe 4 times a year. That's a Victorian myth. That's an Enlightenment myth.
Fringe?
No fringe. Yep. They bathed in the lakes in the Middle Ages too. Not so much. So not many people could actually swim.
There's a lot of people that drown.
There's a lot of people that drowned. They did bathe in rivers. And how do we know they bathed in rivers? Because there are coroner's reports from across medieval Europe talking about people drowning in the river while bathing. Yeah.
Further proof that they did, or at least tried to in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. Further proof that they bathed, or at least they tried to.
Important enough to risk your life.
Yeah, it was important enough to risk your life. And there are stories from the Middle Ages, folk tales and Arthurian romances where major plot points revolve around bathing or being clean or being not clean. For instance, there's a Arthurian romance called L'Enval. A version from 1400 has an episode in which our hero, L'Enval, encounters this poor, what?
Give you this, no, there it is.
Encounters this poor man. Mr. Steins, it's okay. He's fine. He's not going to destroy my hair. Yeah. He said, damn dude, don't tear her scalp off. Anyway, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to double tap that screen and consider subscribing, guys. Anyway, this Sir L'Enval, he encounters this poor man who's wailing outside of the church. And he says he's desperate because he can't attend mass because his clothes are dirty and he's dirty. And he can't afford to have them laundered and he can't afford to go to the bathhouse. The idea being that it was so uncommon for people to be that dirty that it's an actual plot point and a sign of sadness and desperation. And also it conveys to us the idea that it was expected that you would be clean to attend mass. And guess what, guys? People went to mass every day in medieval Europe. Once later medieval Europe. Obviously, here is the caveat in case you didn't know this. The Middle Ages is about 1,000 years. Europe is not a monolith. The Middle Ages is not a monolith, right? Your mileage is going to vary from place to place and from era to era within that 1,000 years. So we're talking, vast generalizations, but also the statement that people only bathe 4 times a year is also a vast generalization. So. Yeah. Bianca, hello, welcome. Nice to see you again. Yeah, and so that's a good comment. There was no industrial pollution back then. So yes, that is true to a certain extent. There was pollution, just not like we have now, not from factories. So the problem with the pre-modern world, and actually the pre-20th century world mostly, is that most homes were heated by, in Europe anyway, were heated by fires, by smoke. Or not by smoke. They were heated by fires, which meant they created smoke. Also, cooking was done over fires, which also created smoke. And chimneys are a late invention in Europe. They don't even come to Europe until the 12th century. And it takes them centuries to actually become commonplace in every home. It is not until the 17th century that most people, common people, actually get chimneys. Before that, they had a hole in the ceiling. And so, homes are also smoke. What's not?
This isn't going to be long enough.
Okay, well,
String.
I guess.
To switch to it.
Okay, switch to another one. Right. Okay. So, homes were smoky, and smoke isn't just something you inhale, it's filled with soot, there's grease floating around, and so that actually gets on your skin and hair as well, which is one of the reasons that most people, men and women, covered their hair. It wasn't so much about modesty, it was about the practicality of trying to keep your hair as clean as possible, because medieval people absolutely did wash their hair. We have lots of documents that talk about a recommended rhythm of once every 3 weeks, and you used basically a hair wash that was lye. It was a lye solution. So it was alkaline, and alkaline solutions are very good at removing the grease. Also, the medieval comb itself, which we were just using, is designed to remove the dirt and the grease from hair as well. And it's very effective. And when you are not washing your hair every day with industrial grade grease removers, your scalp doesn't produce that much oil. It really doesn't. So your hair just doesn't get that oily from your scalp. Which brings us to the topic of the fire smoke, where if your hair is exposed and you live in an environment where you don't have chimneys and it's very smoky, your hair needs to be covered to keep it clean for as long as possible. Because again, medieval people didn't like being dirty. And we also know they didn't like it because we have poems and songs, usually where people gripe about being dirty because of extraordinary circumstances. For instance, there's this 12th century poem called The Nun's Lament. And in it, this nun, who's actually a noblewoman, this convent, she complains about how awful her life in the convent is versus her life outside of the convent, because her clothes are dirty, she's dirty, her hair is dirty. She really just doesn't like this at all. So, if it were standard and normal, but it's not. There's another, oh God, that was a scary one. There's a record from Constantinople from the 13th century, 12th century, from the 12th century. This gentleman basically left us his own records in which he complains about the cesspit. He lives in an apartment building, actually. And one of his neighbors, the cesspit that he was supposed to use to dispose of his waste, his night soil, has started overflowing and running down the corridor, and apparently has started coming in this gentleman's door. The landlord needs to do something about this because it's not normal, because it's not desirable. I'm pretty certain the landlord did nothing. Slumlords are not a new concept. The medical profession was basically barbers doing surgery. That's not true either. So Bull 8410, so Bull, the thing is that medicine, there's a difference between surgeons and physicians. And very often those two were not the same, right? So there's a difference between people who diagnose, and that honestly, that distinction has been maintained to this day. Surgeons are not internal internists, right? They're not. It's the plot point in Scrubs. It's the plot point in a lot of different medical dramas, right? Surgeons they specialize in basically their human body mechanics, right? That's what they are. Physicians are the ones who actually do the diagnosing and prescribe treatments and medicines. And one of the treatments they might prescribe might be surgery, but they're generally not the people doing the actual surgery. Medieval medicine was very sophisticated. That didn't mean it was very scientific. It was founded on highly complex principles of the four humors, but that doesn't mean that it was correct. I would prefer medieval medicine over modern medicine. Don't even think that. But it wasn't just a bunch of random guesses. It was just founded on an understanding that wasn't quite completely correct or correct. Let me see. Great Aunt Elizabeth says, I have managed to get my hair down to washing with shampoo monthly in the summer and 2 to 3 months in the winter. I use a boar bristle brush, occasionally water washes, and keep it tied up at the end near the Strix Imperatrix says that's why surgeons in the UK are traditionally addressed as Mr. rather than Doctor. Oh, that's very interesting.
I didn't know that.
We're not LARPers. We're actually living history people. We're reenactors. Would I like to live back before? No. Would I like to live like back before? Okay, so there's a difference between those two things. Would I like to live like back before? There are aspects of pre-industrial life in Europe that I absolutely prefer to modern ones. For instance, and actually pre-20th century, very specific. Communities were much more engaged with each other. People in the communities interacted regularly. There were regular dances. People actually went and danced proper dance, drugged up rave dancing. People got together and played music, sang songs together, told stories. We weren't all isolated behind a screen, which is ironic, I know, because we're on we are each on the side of a screen here. I get it. But there, that kind of socialization and interaction is much more appealing. People would get together and work on crafts together every day. There were a lot more holidays in the Middle Ages than there are now. There were about 130 days a year and work because they were holy days of observance or they were saints' feast days. It was a different pace of life. Life was slower.
I hope this is in the right spot.
It's perfect. Okay, great. So everyone, the technique that was just being demonstrated is a technique we now call hair taping. And it's great because it requires no bobby pins. It's very, very stable, right? It stays no matter what. And I have tested this because I didn't have someone help me get it out for a couple of days. I've actually had this style in for 2 weeks and it was pretty good looking even by the end. There were some flyaways, but it was still going pretty strong.
Some flyaways today, but I was
Yeah.
going quick.
It's okay. Okay.
Here's what we use to do it. Here's one version of a bodkin.
What do we do in this channel? This is a medieval living history channel. So I research how people lived their lives in the Middle Ages, dancing, cooking, dressing, hair, bathing practices, music, crafts, handcrafts, and I recreate it as closely as we can given the materials we have and, given safety concerns such as lead is and arsenic and orpiment are not materials with which I will work. Right. Medieval times they ate boar. Yeah. Africa. So I guess maybe people in Africa ate warthogs, but boar, yeah, 100% in Europe, definitely. Boar hunting was one of the bestest ways to prove your manliness was to go boar hunting and avoid getting gored. Okay, so Hanson?
Boars are scary.
Yes. Boars are very scary. Okay. Okay, so this is called, I don't know if we're center, right? Yeah, this is called a mitre or a turret in 15th century English. Some people erroneously know it as a Hennin, but that is a horrible misunderstanding by a Victorian historian. It's not what they were called in the era in any part of the world ever until the 19th century when, you put it on upside down. Yeah, okay. It's made of sheepskin vellum on the inside for the frame, so it's very, very light. It's sturdy, it's flexible, and it's lined in linen, and then this one has a shell of wool, but it probably should be velvet. Okay, next comes the veil. Yes, the veil. Mm-hmm. So over top of that, there's a front part, the little face part.
I'm looking for it.
Yep. So this is silk, and it's about the width that the silk would have been, right? And it has a little face frame. I'll show you that in a moment. It basically goes on, and it gets pinned, and I did lay out some pins on somewhere. Well, there were 2. Well, we can find the other one. Okay. It gets pinned here under the turret in the back. The medieval dressing for men and women actually was extremely not through the hat, just pin the veil to itself. Like, okay. Yep. I mean, if you go through the hat, that's okay too, but it's so the medieval pre-modern clothing before zippers and before zippers and snaps, pins were heavily used in the getting dressed process, right? They were actually, the various layers were held together by pins, both the dressing layers and the headdress layers. And I know many of you are going to wonder, does that mean that you were getting poked by pins all the time? No, never. Never, never, never. He is, but he's the one working with it.
I'm scared of pins too.
And that's why when in inventories, especially wedding trousseaux from the Middle Ages, we see huge quantities of pins being sent with the bride because it was a key part of getting dressed. Okay, so I'll show you what it looks like so far. Okay, so now we have one more layer. We have one more layer, and that is the hood. So this hood is basically, it's also called a lappet or a frontlet. Let me see, there's actually a front and a back to this one. Okay, this is the front. Okay, so it's basically just a long rectangle. And this is silk velvet, right? Okay, so then it goes on over top of all of this. I need you to figure out where is the middle so that it's evenly draped. And it actually goes around and under the veil.
Does it cover part of the top?
It goes a little bit forward like that. Yep, just like that. Okay. What did you just do? Why did you do that? Don't pull, lift. Sorry, normally I have a damsel who's actually trained at this particular thing, but I've got a stand-in valet and he's doing a great job. Okay, so it goes under it and it gets pinned also down here at the base.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll pull it forward a little bit.
And I'm scared of pins.
He's also scared of pins and needles, like petrified, as in he needs to be given twilight sleep just to be able to get certain shots. That's why women's spending money has often been called pin money. Imperatrix, yes, that is exactly why. There was actually and that's that. So we call pin money, we refer to it as some kind of trivial thing. It was not in the Middle Ages. The line item for pins was a big one. It was a major important part of the, it was a major part of getting dressed and daily life. Yeah. Why did they wear so much on their head? It's fashion. It's fashion. Okay. Is it all pinned?
I pinned it.
Okay.
I pinned the other thing, so
Okay. So now, yeah.
And now you throw my phone on.
Now I throw your phone on the ground.
Don't
Okay.
understand technology.
Yeah. So why did they wear so much on their heads? It's fashion, right? And actually the veil is a little too far forward. I just realized it's fashion. It's just a question of fashion, right? Humans are peacocks. Men also actually went through periods of wearing different things and more or less on their heads as well. Humans like variation, they like dressing fancy, and they like doing different things than they did before. Now, the other thing you have to remember that the time that is being represented here, the 15th century, it's what's called the Little Ice Age, right? It's an era known as the Little Ice Age. And so Europe is getting cold, very cold by the 15th century. And so actually these layers are not just fashionable, they're practical, because it helps you stay warm when it's very, very cold otherwise. Okay. I'm just not able, oh, because there's a wrinkle there. That's why. It's not going to, I'll wait until the Bangkok humidity gets it out. Okay. Well, everyone, this is basically the look for today, right? And you'll notice this is what's called, what we call now a truncated hennin or a truncated miter. It's the narrow, shorter version, right? So this will be easy for me to teach dance in. Yeah. Okay, everyone, are there any final questions? We must away. I will be live streaming the dance class. Oh, I just realized how uneven my smock is. I will be live streaming the dance class from the medieval village here in Thailand. So if you would like to watch me teaching medieval dance and maybe learn along, then feel free to tune in to that live stream. That will be 4 p.m. Bangkok time. So that will be about 3 hours from now.
Yep, we're running very late.
We're running late. Okay, everyone. Well, if you've been enjoying this, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to support my work in bringing history to life in a fun and interactive fashion, then consider becoming a patron or a YouTube channel member. Okay, everyone, until next time, may your adventures in history be creative. Bye, everyone.